Hey everyone, it's Thursday, March 19th. I think this dispatch will be real brief today. Just going to run real quickly over what today's readings are. We changed Psalms. It's Thursday, so Thursday, Friday, Saturday is a new Psalm, and this time it's a familiar one. It's Psalm 23. But just because it's familiar, don't skip over it. I want you to read it each day as we go through these next few days. One of the really interesting things that I love about this psalm that one of my Old Testament professors taught my class was that phrase, lead me in paths of righteousness. That word paths in Hebrew actually suggests what we might call wheel ruts. When I was a kid, we would visit Spokane, Washington, where my grandparents lived while they were alive. And Spokane has some very big, steep hills in the downtown area. And when these hills were paved, they actually put wheel ruts into these hills. You don't need them in the summertime. They're kind of an annoyance. But in the wintertime, when there's snow on the roads, if you don't get yourself into one of those wheel ruts, you'll have a very hard time making it up the hill. And I think that's a beautiful illustration of what disciplines of righteousness can accomplish for us. They establish patterns for us so that when things are difficult, when there's snow on the roads, we're far less likely to veer off the path. Lead me in paths of righteousness. We're also now turning to 1 Samuel chapter 15. At this point, Saul, who was Israel's first king, Israel begged God to give them a king, and God refused for so long. Finally, God relents, gives them Saul. Saul turns out not to be a very good king, and here is where God officially rejects Saul. And Samuel and Saul have a confrontation with one another. Saul goes out and destroys the Amalekites, which God had told him to do, but God told Saul not to take any spoils of the victory, to destroy everything. And Saul comes back with sheep and livestock and so forth, and has disobeyed God. This is a great example of how Old Testament texts can sometimes be very hard to interpret, very hard to find meaning from. Why would God not be glad that some life, be it whether even though it was animal life, be preserved? So just one of those tricky questions that we find ourselves faced with time and again as we read the Old Testament. And then finally, from Paul's letter to the Ephesians, some instructions for living together. I love that Paul says we are members of one another, indicating how tightly knit the community of Christians ought to be. And he says, speaking of the power of our words, words may give grace to those who hear. Our words can communicate grace to others. That's it for today. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.